Okay, so today we wanted to discuss a little bit about post-deployment monitoring. And the purpose is to give like a high-level idea of what we want to do and what we want to accomplish, but also to hear from you about maybe some additional thoughts or concerns or opportunities that I may have not noticed. So definitely hear from you. Dimitri was kind enough to do a whiteboard. But before we share the whiteboard, I just wanted to give a background a little bit about what this issue is, what we're currently doing, and some background. So I'm going to start with the epic itself. And I will also share my screen so that you guys can see, sorry, you all can see what we're talking about. So post-deployment monitoring, the basic idea is that once you have automatic CI/CD and everything is deploying properly, you also have a step post-deployment where you want to make sure that everything is still working properly. And if it's not, then you want to do something about the fact that it's not working properly. So for the MVC, what we wanted to do here was kind of use what we already have built in GitLab. So this was a collaboration with the monitor team, with actually two groups in the monitor team. So one group was incident response, and the other one is the APM team. And what we did here was the monitoring team has an incident response feature, which means that if there's a threshold that is exceeded, it automatically opens an issue for you. Okay, so someone knows that they need to deal with it. And what the first thing that we did was we researched this mechanism, and we figured out that we could leverage the API behind it in order to trigger something in the pipeline. So if there's the threshold that's crossed, we will eventually either stop the rollout, or if we're talking about incremental rollout, or even roll back in incremental rollout or in a regular deployment. So the idea is there's some really big problem, and the system will automatically identify it and roll it and take care of it for you. That's the idea of post-deployment. And with the APM team, we decided to start with what we have already out of the box in GitLab today. And what we have is Prometheus errors that are notifications that are triggered in one of these three metrics. So throughput, latency, or HTTP error rate. Those are the ones that we started with. If one of these exceeds, then we will automatically deploy. That's the big idea. This isn't yet developed. It's still in its early stages, and we'll talk about a little bit about what we have in mind and where we're going with it. The nice thing about metrics in GitLab is that basically you can support any metric without any additional work because we're leveraging the already existing mechanisms. So even if a user is creating a custom metric, as long as it's working in terms of the monitoring team, we should automatically be able to support it because we're all using APIs that already exist in the system. Any questions up until now?
Yes. To define that error threshold, so we are going to check the errors just right before deployment. And if that threshold is met, then we are canceling the deployment. Just in terms of timing, how do things unfold?
So the monitoring is done constantly. So it's done pre-deployment, post-deployment. It's done all the time. And so it gets pulled. I don't know exactly, I don't remember by heart exactly how often it gets pulled, but it's all the time. There's pulling going on all the time.
Yeah, I know that, for example, for the health of the pods.
Exactly.
Yeah, it just like, yeah, I mean, there is a bit, there are a few seconds. There's a bit of latency, but like, yeah, that's, yeah. But like, okay, this check would be done pre-deployment. But okay, yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, So as I mentioned, we're using the existing Prometheus API. And if the error exceeds, we will stop the deployment or rollback. It depends on what the user defines, because not every user wants an automatic rollback. Some just want to stop. Some still want to manually roll back. And we'll go into that in a minute when I go through some user insights that we've done we've done user research around this area. So in general, this is a high level. The UX doesn't need to actually look like this at the end of the day, but this is the general idea, is that this is our environments page. You can see this is a deploy board. By the way, this is not only supported for Kubernetes, this is supported for any deployment, okay? Very important to note. So here you see the environment page, and you can see we have the rollback board. This already exists today. And I think, here, you can see here there's a indication that there's an error rate exceeded 0.1. That's going to show up in the environment page. And then based on this data, the user can decide whether they want to abort or roll back, or this can be done automatically, depends on what they chose. And it says rolling back to blah, 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 the previous deployment, right? And we'll go into that in detail in a minute. Something really interesting, I may be jumping ahead, but something really interesting, again, with the monitor team. So today we have metrics that you can see in any deployment. I don't have an active project to show this, but basically just imagine you see a graph over time and you can see, I don't know, the CPU, for example. What they're doing now, the monitoring team, is they're doing annotations inside that graph. So you can tell that something happened in that specific time interval. So imagine that you have a deployment and then you see that the CPU is all of a sudden exceeded. You can deduct from that the deployment was the culprit, and you can learn a lot from it. So there's a lot of additional work that we're doing around this to improve the user experience. Another idea that we had in the beginning of this epic was also to add this data to the merge request widget. For the MVC, we decided to skip this, but just so you get a high level picture. So the merge request itself, you have the data of the deployment. So this is exactly the MR that was deployed. And then you can get the notifications there as well. That's in a really, really high level.
Would you, or would you be able to walk through all the current existing ideas that sprouted out? Like, I'm not so much talking about insights, we'll go into that in a little bit, but I will already pre-document the ideas in the mural board so we can shuffle them around.
Sure. So hopefully I have linked them all to the right place. And basically you can see the different epics and issues that are related here that are part of this epic. So let's go from the bottom to the top. So the first thing we did was to research if we could actually, leverage the incident response mechanism, and that we concluded, and it was successful. So we were able to do that. So that was good news. And that's when we started to think, okay, we're going to go for this issue. Okay, so let's start with these two. So we had show alerts and environment index page, and I will show you there's already a mock-up for that as well. So the idea is, this is the way alerts look today in incident response. Okay, so you can see this already exists. It's under the alerts tab. This is what it looks like. And what we wanted to do was kind of take the environment page and propagate the most critical alert that's currently existing in the system and show it to you in the environment page. Okay. View details will bring you to the metrics page so that you can do further analysis. We had to debate whether this goes to the alerts page or to the metrics page, but currently it's to the metrics.
Mm-hmm. And question, why what were the thoughts behind adding that to the environment page? Because is this the place where people are monitoring or like going back, or just like curious what were the thoughts there?
So there's three places actually that we wanted to like kind of connect everything together. The first is the environment page because it shows you exactly what's going on within your environment. And if you're looking at a production environment, you're most likely also looking at, you know, this page, especially if you're talking about deploy boards. That's usually where you want to check your health and see that everything is fine and green and great. Actually, 4 places now that I think about it. So that's the first place. The second place, which is still related to environments, is something that I talked to Jackie about, is adding this to there's an environments dashboard. So also having this indicator color the environment in the environment dashboard so that you know there's a problem. So that's the second place. The third place is in the pipeline itself. Okay, and I'll show that in another issue. And the idea is when someone is monitoring a deployment, they're either looking at the environments page or they're looking at the pipeline page. And throughout the user interviews, both of them came up. So I think we both we need to support both. Then the fourth place is the alerts. So the alerts page here. The alerts page here, what we wanted to do is, this already exists, but now you see a critical error, but you don't have an option to act on it. So we wanted to add something here. I'm not sure exactly where, we'll talk about that later, that you could do a rollback or cancel here from here. Okay, so those are the 4 places. Okay?
Clear, yeah, clear.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna go back. So this is supposed to find it. So this was the first issue. The second one, which is the most important issue of the entire post deployment, is actually doing the cancel, right? So we want to add a cancel button to the environment page. Excuse my ugly mock-up. This is something that I did. I'm sure Dimitri will fix it. But the idea is, since we already see the error here, we can do the stop here. And again, we need to support 2 different mechanisms. One is a manual stop and one is an automatic stop. Users have different preferences whether they want manual or automatic. So it's important to support both. So yeah.
Is it a stop or a rollback? Like, what does a cancel do? Like.
So great question. Stop is stop and rollback is rollback. They're not the same. Stop, so in case of an incremental rollout, it will stop rolling out the pods. So it'll, you know, leave, I guess, whatever the amount of pods that you decided is going to roll out with a faulty state until you roll them back. And the rest of the pods will just remain with the old versions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and rollback will roll back everything.
Yeah, because especially if that's going to be a manual intervention, intervening, whatever you got me, we have to be super clear what that will mean, because you don't want to screw up. Yeah, just be on lot. It's obvious.
Yeah, I mean, here the UX is not final. There's no like notification here and another acknowledgement, and this is missing. This is just something that I put in here so that people understand what I'm talking about.
Sure, just want to make sure that we're on the same page, but we are.
Yeah.
It's not clear to me yet. Sorry about that. But like that cancel, if you are scrolling down a bit to that mockup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I don't see the difference between that added stop button, red and white, and which you have added, and the one that already exists. The one that already exists, if I'm not mistaken, is the stop environment button. What would be the difference between the 2?
Nothing. They're exactly the same, but for some reason I didn't see on the production that this is possible. They would be exactly the same.
Also, this red and white square, to me it says stop environment. To me, that's what it means.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
This is good. The stop, the rollout has like a kind of a refresh icon.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, no, that's correct. Okay.
Okay. So we started with cancel because I think cancel is less harmful than rollback. So I wanted to start very carefully without, I mean, we're going to add each one individually because each one of them gives value, right? But this one is a little bit more safe. That makes sense? So what this is doing again is adding the cancel button. It will auto cancel deployment jobs, okay? When alert manager detected a critical alert on environment. Okay, this is in case the user selects this. We're not gonna do this in case the user doesn't select it, okay? And it's going to work similarly like skip outdated deployment job. So taking you back to skip outdated deployment job, which was formerly known as forward deployment, allow only forward deployments. What it does is it looks at the ID of the deployment, and if it's not the right idea, it skips that deployment. So leveraging that mechanism, we're going to see if there's an alert, we're going to cancel the deployment. Okay.
And all right, sorry, but so cancel means stop.
Cancel. Yes.
It means stopping at the point, or like, so sorry.
Yes.
So where stop, or what does it cancel? I'm sorry.
Cancel is stop. Cancel is stop. I'm sorry.
Instead of cancel and stop, how about saying cancel in the actions, like cancel deployment or stop deployment, or cancel rollout and stop rollout? Like I think if you add the word after it, it'll make it a little bit clearer.
Yes. Good point, Marcel. So cancel deployment, we'll leave it in the same state. So it doesn't progress. It doesn't continue rolling out in the rollout, but it doesn't do the rollback. So it just cancels at the whatever state it's at.
I think it would make sense, like with the icon there and also the way you explained it, to call it just a stop deployment, because cancel makes it feel like you're rolling back to the beginning, like you're canceling everything. But if you just say stop or like even pause, I think might be a little bit clearer.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so what else did I write? Manual cancel should be visible at all times, even when no alert is raised. This just makes the logic easier. Since this is a manual action, I think a user should be able to decide whether they want to, well, I hope I'm saying this correct, Marcel, stop the deployment at any time, even if there's no alert. But definitely if there is an alert, they have an incentive to do that. So it should be visible at any time, but only users that are allowed to deploy to the environment can press the button. So up to you, Dimitri. I wrote this button should be hidden or disabled for other users that don't have the right permissions. Okay?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then we have this additional note, an indication will be stated on the pipeline that the job was canceled, okay? Because we need to know that something happened on the pipeline itself. So there is a follow-up issue to this. This is like the rabbit hole of GitLab, which says, let's state the cancel pipeline reason in the job page in case the rollout was stopped, okay? So what happens now is we're gonna see this canceled icon, okay? Which exists today, but we don't know why. Like a user that goes into this pipeline will see that it's canceled, but we don't know why it was canceled. So what we want to do is add to the pipeline another sentence with another one of my ugly mockups that says, this job was canceled due to the alert that was raised.
And what if the user will just stop / cancel the deployment without any issues?
So then we need to have like user canceled. That's a good point, and I need to add it here.
Yeah, I just, you know, like a really bad suggestion, but hey, just let me say that I would be like to ask for a comment, which is stupid, of course. I don't propose that as a real solutions, but we could ask for input if a user is just canceling it. Of course, like you don't want to have a pop-up or something in your face. But again, we're brainstorming, so just pointing that out.
Well, it's actually not that bad of an idea, Nadia, because I think that if a user presses cancel, we have to put up at least one pop-up that says, "Are you sure?" Because it's, you know, a harmful effect. So maybe like we could do something like when you delete a repo and they tell you you need to write the repo name, you know, when you do something really bad. So you can have a user say, what's the reason you're canceling, and have them like, and that can propagate.
Yeah, I'll leave this up to Dimitri, but I think that's also maybe for the later, for the auditability purposes. I think that could be important when the auditor comes and I don't know, maybe you want to have a bit more details why somebody hit the stop or cancel or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So that's about the cancel button to the environment page. Next up, we have automatic rollback in case of failure. So, so this is not the stop deployment. This is actually rollback. Okay. And this one is a little bit more invasive and it's a little bit more problematic. So what you see here is mock-ups from Spinnaker. It's not from our UI. And what it looks like in Spinnaker. So what they have is, they have exactly what you're rolling back. I'm gonna skip that because I don't think it's important to understand Spinnaker at the moment. So the first thing we need to do is add a setting for users to configure whether they want to support auto rollback, yes or no. This is really important because, again, this is a harmful event, and people that I was talking to didn't necessarily trust the system enough to say that they want auto rollback, or they support auto rollback for any non-production environment. So if it happens on staging, yeah. For dev environments, they don't care at all. But this one is really important, especially for production or protected environments. What I wrote here for the first iteration version will roll back to the last successful deployment. So in Spinnaker, for example, they allow users to configure which version they want to roll back to. And here, we're not going to support that, at least not in terms of the MVC. We're just going to take the latest successful one. And for 99% of the people that I interviewed, this was the case. Like they just do the latest deployment. So I'm not even sure that along the line we'll do that. We'll see if there's, you know, demand for it, and then we can add it. Auto rollback must be logged in an audit log as an action done in the pipeline. So I think that's a separate issue to this one, that in terms of iteration, but yes, audit log is super important. And then for MVC, metrics will be defined on a dedicated YAML file. So the idea here, forget what I wrote here, but I just want to say like what the problem is. This is a possible solution, not necessarily the one that we will do. But the idea is that we have a lot of alerts coming in from the system. So if you remember when we talked about the alerts page, yeah, there's a bunch of alerts, and not necessarily every time there's an alert, you want to do a rollback, right? There's very specific alerts that you want to roll back, and the rest of them you want to know about them, but you don't necessarily want to automatic rollback. So it's important that the user define which are these alerts that they want to automatic rollback if those were triggered in any case. And that's the problem, okay? So the problem is, how do you define the alerts that you want to roll back on. Okay, that's what we wanted to find a solution. Two that came to mind in my mind was, one of them was make a huge list in the settings where you can just check or uncheck different alerts. Besides the fact that this would require pagination and a bunch of other really annoying stuff that we need to overcome, there's also custom alerts that we don't know ahead of time. So we need users to somehow define them as well. So that's one of the two cons for that approach. Another solution that I thought for this problem, which I kind of stole from the monitor team, is, where did I write it? Too many tabs. Who else has this problem? Okay, so metrics will be defined on a dedicated YAML file. So the way that metrics works today in GitLab, in terms of the dashboards that you see, you actually define in a YAML file the dashboard that you want to see. And the dashboard reads those YAML files, and that's what they display. So I thought that would be a nice way to overcome this, because the user defines in a YAML file, error rate exceeded 90%. And in case there's a match, then there's an automatic rollback. But, you know, this is just a suggestion.
Yeah. Interesting one. It depends which persona and which people will be the one who will be like setting those things up. I mean, because one obviously will be easier to access within the user interface. The other one will be in the YAML. Yeah, I'm not sure.
And who has access to the YAML as well versus who has access to the interface. So you can lock things down in the admin to just admin users, but the YAML would be maintainers could edit that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a brainstorming session. So, you know, there's no bad ideas. Just, you know, whoever has an idea can throw them out there.
So what's just a question to you, Orit. What kind of a people do we expect, like defining those alerts? And what can you actually help me to understand what are the custom alerts? What does that mean?
Yes. So let's start question by question. First of all, the people who are setting these rollbacks are the people who have the rights to deploy to the system, to that environment. So we should, the environments that are concerning the most are the protected environments. And if someone is a maintainer in that environment, and they can write the YAML, then I think we're okay. So that's the first question in terms of permissions. Another interesting idea, which leverages another stage, is using parent-child pipeline. So maybe we could do like some different permission for, have that as a child pipeline that's called the YAML file, which may, you know, have even less audience than the regular YAML file. I don't know. Those are some ideas. And in terms of custom metrics, so we have in our documentation or this is just linking to a different one, to the epic. Oh, this is really scary. To our documentation. Okay, so we have a bunch of metrics that are supported and can be found in documentation. Basically, in Prometheus, we support anything that goes through Prometheus. So we have things that we built out of the box, but there's so many more errors that users can define, and anything that's supported by Prometheus is supported by GitLab, but it doesn't come like out of the box free as in these. So a user would basically need to create this syntax for something else that they're measuring. Did that answer the question?
Well, a question that I've had since you were talking about like that YAML file 5 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago. It's just, I feel like I need to see like an example of what a user defined think would
That's a great question, or in other words, I had that prepared in advance. Too many tabs already. Okay, so I wrote here, this is similar to the common MetricSiamo file that can be found in --GitLab dashboard YAML. So I don't have a project that does this, but if you do and you can look into that, it's basically built in a similar way. That's the way that the dashboards are shown. I might have access to Dov's project, but I think that's a little bit like going into the details too much. And we can do that offline too. But you can just imagine.
I cannot find the GitLab /dashboards.yaml, but
I will.
we can take that offline and then
I'll make sure that you get that. But imagine it as if you were using a CSV file that just has a bunch of values. And those are the values that we're going to take in terms of where to start to do the rollback. If it equals to one of those values, then you have a trigger.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, I understand. It's just like from a practical point of view, from like a technical deployment point of view, I'm trying to see, you know, what would be just like an example of a custom rule.
I'll make sure to get it for you.
I just need examples. That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
And also, you know, whatever examples we have, we should maybe just link it at some point, you know, later in the future or into the documentation to just, you know, let the users know. And anyway.
Well, it's just a thought. I'm not sure this is the approach we're going to have at the end of the day. But the reason I like this is because it follows other processes that we have within GitLab, and this post-deployment monitoring is very closely tied to monitor itself. So theoretically, it's the same persona.
I dropped a link in chat just because I wasn't sure if this is what you were talking about, but it didn't match exactly, but it did kind of had the same feel.
See. I think so. I'm not 100% sure, but it does look very similar to what I've seen. Yeah, it looks very, very similar. So this is like the title of the chart that you would see. I don't know if we have any dashboards here. Yeah, we don't have anything enabled, but in order to enable it, you would basically like have a YAML file that this is calling, and that's what's displayed in the dashboard. So in this scenario, you would see anomaly chart and the container CPU usage per environment. Those would be the two things that you would see in the dashboard. Okay. Dimitri, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was wondering, we have limited time for this meeting. So we have started from explaining, you know, the problem area, the epic, what has gone into that. We've not yet gone over, or have we gone over the opportunities, the insights you have gathered?
No, some of them are like things that we discussed already, but I think it's much shorter. So in any case, I think that's the main idea. We have some small different improvements like adding to the alerts page and things like that, but that's the basic idea around the high level concept of what we want to accomplish. And in terms of user interviews, you're more than welcome to look into these interviews, but I'm going to just keep it really, really short in terms of what we learned from there. So one is users want to roll back to the latest stable version. We talked about that. This one was really interesting. Users prefer defining metrics through UI. This was across the board. Everyone like just wanted to select what metrics they want to see. Health check is very important for Kubernetes metrics. This is something that wasn't in the out-of-the-box metrics that we provided, and it's something that I'm working with the monitor team to expand on. Users prefer auto rollback to manual for specific thresholds, so that's what we were talking about in this specific issue. So the rollback is very specific. So for example, something that everyone agreed upon was that if the CPU usage was over 90%, they know there's a big problem and they wanted to roll back. But that was the only consensus that I heard from these specific interviews. And I want to be cautious about this because I interviewed 6 people. There's thousands of users. So that may change. So I think it's important to specify exactly which thresholds need rollback. Users want to see threshold notifications on the pipeline itself. So not only on the environment page. It's just a matter of how people are used to work. Some people work usually on the pipeline, some people on the environments page. Users prefer stop rollout if threshold is crossed and not an automatic rollback. So stop deployment. Users require auto and manual rollback methods. So this one was very simple. Some people just don't trust auto rollback, and some don't even have an automatic process for CI/CD yet. So there's nothing to do automatic. Users want to get notifications throughout the rollback process. So they want to know it started. They wanted to know what state it is at every given moment. They want to know that it's successful. They want to get notifications all the time that what's happening. Notification and rollback differ for different environments. So you can't say the same thing for protected environments and not protected environments. They need to behave differently. And one more user research issue that I haven't opened up yet, but I opened an implementation issue today with Dove because I need the monitor team, is a really, really cool opportunity that we have for post deployment and connecting it, Etienne, you'll love this, with AWS. So one of the main things that happen when you deploy to AWS is that you tend to spend a lot of budget that you didn't mean to. So if we could connect post-deployment with overspending or cost in AWS, that would be a wow moment for GitLab. And so I'm working with the monitor team now to support AWS cost metrics that we could leverage in terms of alerts that we can connect here so that we could stop or roll back the environments in case budget was crossed.
Well, that's my practical example here. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's also something that came up here. Like someone said that they were like going $20,000 over budget just from one deployment because they didn't notice they were doing all these things, because not all developers know what they're doing in terms of AWS. So anyway, also crossing into another high-level topic, which is deploying to AWS, but the connection together tells a really nice story and definitely shows value to our customers. You can't get more value than saving money, right? So, so very excited about that.
So I'm curious, what did the monitor team say about the AWS billing monitoring? Or did they make any progress, or did they start working on that?
So since I talked to Dove about this an hour ago, they haven't really started on it, but we opened up an issue. I sent him a tool that an open source tool that someone had already built that connects Prometheus to the CLI, the AWS CLI, the API call for the budget. So it looks pretty straightforward in terms of connecting it to GitLab, which is really, really cool. The downside is that every API call that you do to cost for AWS costs you $0.1. So it's something that we need to take into account when we go ahead to implement that. Don't go over budget just for monitoring.
Yeah, so don't poll every second.
Yeah. So I found a really, really nice tool that's already, like, it's on GitHub, and I think we can pull it in and use it. So, I mean, that's out of scope of progressive delivery, but it's something that we can connect so nicely together and tell a really nice story to our customers that goes across the stages. Dimitri, you're up. I hope that was quick enough.
we got a little bit of time left. And with that, I would like to make the most of our time and the explanation given by Ulrich. So the idea is to go into the mural board. But before we do that, I would ideally like to keep this conversation going. I want to spend less, because we've only a little bit of time left, on explaining what we're going to do, and more of like extracting the ideas that are now perhaps potentially circling around in your head. And then I and Orit and Nadia will potentially document them in the mural board, and any further steps can then be done in a separate session, because there's not enough time for that. So I think the most important point, TLDR, do you have any ideas following the explanation from Orit? Then we're gonna put them into the mural board, and we can go like further from that point.
It sounded like Orit have proposed quite a few good suggestions. I would say, at least from what I've seen, and like my experience, have been very logical. There would be some questions, for example, where to add settings. Will it be YAML? Will it be UI? That probably, yeah, product designer inside of me would say we would need to research. Yeah, but I felt like that was pretty inspiring, pretty spot on to my understanding, and I think it would be like a lot of, for us, more about like which choice do we make, which one is more feasible. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that the current ideas out there are well done indeed. How I do see them, though, is that they're more lined up as like, hey, if we do this, then we can do this next, and this next, and this next, and this next. And what this is about is to consider alternatives, to consider where are we missing, like what are the gaps currently? Do we have alternative ideas that just Orit didn't think of potentially? Because we are here to help her think of those ideas, right? Not to discount any ideas she has had, because I think they're very, very valuable, just to add to them and then be able to say, hey, it might make sense to combine these ideas. It might make sense to see if these ideas are worthwhile to be prioritized versus the others, or vice versa. So it's mostly about extracting the knowledge from the people in here and add to the ideas that are already proposed. So yeah, I know I'm putting a lot of pressure on your shoulders now, Etienne and Marcel, but did any of such ideas come to mind? Do you see like others, perhaps a window of opportunity there, etc.?
The only thing that I'm thinking of now is, and you touched a bit on that, Dimitri, is just like the priority of things, because already presented a lot of tasks that need to happen. I was thinking of the Kubernetes pods API. That's the API that we use to monitor the health of the pods. I looked at that a while back, and I know that there is an entire framework about communicating with Kubernetes in general. And so how do we build up based on all this like API, all this framework that we have, right? And I think we are going to make many more API calls, new types of API calls. And so we need to see, based on like the framework we have, how can we logically build up on that framework, right? What makes the most sense based on what we have to start with? To me, that's how the priority of task will be defined from the technical point of view, right? So that's what I was thinking of, right? So we need someone who's like maybe more familiar than me about about this actual framework and the current API calls that we are making. just to know where we're starting from, and so how can we build up on that, or we need someone to ramp up on that.
Just for my understanding, if you would have to distill your idea in one sentence, how would you frame it?
Distill my idea is one sentence.
Something that fits on a sticky note.
Yeah.
And I mean, if
everything that I said in one sentence was like, you know, research the current framework we have, and know how to build up on that so that we can just come up with a priority of tasks. And when I say framework, I'm talking about the framework around the Kubernetes API. Kubernetes, yeah. Sorry if I'm not making the note taking easy.
No worries. So to understand a little bit better what you're talking about, this research is needed in order to facilitate what?
To facilitate the integration of new API calls. Like this, I don't know monitoring that much apart from like what I talked about. This this Kubernetes pods API and the framework around that. That's all I know of. And and so we need either someone who's more knowledgeable about that, or we need someone else to do more research to ramp up on this existing framework. And once we have this person ramped up, like, you know, correctly, then we we'll have a better idea of what's technically feasible or how we can build up on top of that framework. Yeah, that's basically it.
So this is, to my understanding, is more of like how we would approach potential implementation of the ideas of ORIC, right?
Yeah.
So very valuable. Not what I'm looking for though. I'm trying to expand upon the ideas that ORIC has generated and see if there are alternative ideas that we haven't thought of right now. And because
I have
ORIC
a
has
question.
Yeah,
I have a question just to try to kind of spawn the idea engine. I was wondering if there was any idea as to what would be the MVC that would kind of satisfy the most number of users based on those. Sorry, I don't know if this goes into the idea section, but it's more what MVC could we add that would kind of satisfy the most number of users to say that we now do have post-deployment monitoring, and that might kind of drive what would be the ideas for kind of that first step as well. And that could then kind of, we have something to build off.
Wait, all right. I'll give a very short overview of the whiteboard, because you're looking from a bird's eye perspective while I'm trying to focus this down to the idea generation. I'll quickly share what I've been going on here. So this is the board, and it has 3 layers. Actually, it has 4, but let's focus on 3. It has the overall intended desired outcome, which is give post-deployment monitoring to our users, make that available, right? And then we have our research insights. And then we have our ideas. And our ideas section is the one that is the one where we need additional people to come in, give us ideas, give us, their little bit of insight onto, what is possible in their minds, and then jot that down. And then you mentioned, how can we like fix the desired outcome the best for the most amount of people? The idea is that each of these ideas are going to be linked towards these opportunities which are researched. And the more insights or opportunities that those ideas are linked towards, the more people will be made happy because of that, basically. So there is a inherent structure to doing this, which kind of rolls into the more of a process idea you mentioned. It is a bit difficult to do these whiteboarding exercises, correct? I would have loved for more people to be inside of this meeting. A lot more engineers would have been welcome to, you know, to fuel this idea engine, as you so rightfully called it. And I think for now we are out of time, so this might be a valuable opportunity for a next time for improvement. But yeah, it is about, hey, what can we do else for post-deployment monitoring, and how to fuel that and guide that into the right direction is a very hard thing to do. The point is, with those ideas being generated, they are only worthwhile if we can link them to existing opportunities that have been researched. If we are not sure about them, then we can tie that to experiments. Hey, we are not sure about this, let's figure this out. And those are the things that kind of go down here in the bottom. Like, hey, we need to know which threshold can have automatic rollback. That is an unknown, which we need to do a little experiment on. In other words, a little research. And based on that, it can become an opportunity, because at some point we will have an answer towards that research or that experiment, which kind of defines it as an opportunity. Hey, we can give automatic rollback on these and these and these thresholds because we know that users want that.
Dimitri, I think this was great, and we should have started from this intro to the board after Orit's introduction. But I think, and let me know if you're agreeing with my thoughts. I think it was a great session to understand where we stand with the research and with the whole background of the issue. We can schedule a follow-up where you could take it over from the beginning, maybe having more people explain the board again, and maybe guide us. We could be taking one insight, one opportunity, one by one, and brainstorming like all together. This can also be done async, but not sure how much people will participate in that, but we could be taking this together one opportunity by another and like discussing what are the technical possibilities, what are other ideas that we could add on top what Orit proposed. So I think today was a great beginning for opening up that story, and we can continue ideating in the another session, or I think maybe involving more people. So I think we're still doing great. But we should have been starting with the explanation of the board and maybe sharing the screen so it's visible in front of everybody's face. So we are all in one moment.
Yeah, agreed. I think it would have been helpful if we started from the board and then picked a little bit of the issues. Hey, we're now going to discuss this idea, this opportunity, and kind of create that mental model inside of our minds that, hey, I have this idea. Oh, wait a second. That is linked towards this opportunity. Super great. Let's link those together. Bam, bam, bam. And we create those direct connections,
Still,
right?
It was a great intro by Orit. And for the next session, we probably need to give this as a homework for people who haven't joined this to watch this session. And then we're already on the same page to go into like ideation. Today, we opened up the problem. Next time, we can start ideating.
How do you feel about this, Orit? All right, let's do that next time. Let's. Do you want me to set up the meeting, or will you schedule the follow-up, or
whatever you want? I don't mind.
Would you like to do it? I think more.
Okay, I'll do it. I want to do it.
Cheers. All right, let's follow up next time in that case. And thanks all for listening to my little ramble about the board, which will make a lot more sense next time.
Let's do it soon, Orit. I feel like I'm inspired. Wanna continue. Nice session though. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Bye.